Well, today I was online and I was reading some news about the royal family, and I came across an article talking about Meghan Markle. In fact, it was a couple articles talking about how there's been former staff members or personal assistants that have complained or made various allegations that Meghan is abrasive, that she's really hard to deal with. One person described her as a quote unquote demon. And so I was very interested in looking at, can the astrology chart really confirm this? I was able to take a look at 9 different points in the chart, which can lead to someone being abrasive astrologically. And I was shocked. At first I thought maybe people are being a little bit too hard on Meghan because she doesn't have as many supporters. But I actually, well, you'll see in the video that it actually is pretty bad when we take a look at the overall chart as far as indicators indicating somebody that might be abrasive and so forth. So for those of you that are new to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe. I do practice Vedic sidereal astrology, which is the astrology from ancient India. My goal is 10,000 subscribers. We're hovering at above 5,000, so we're about over halfway there. So I just want to thank you all. If you're interested in a personal private reading, check down below for details. I do Zoom readings, which is through Calendly. And then if you're interested in a recorded reading, you can just email me. Now, I also want to add that this astrology reading about Meghan Markle, this is for entertainment purposes only. All these statements about Meghan Markle, these are just my interpretation of the astrology. They're not necessarily absolutely factual. So I do have to put that in there. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the factors that could lead to somebody being abrasive or being a difficult personality to deal with. Because when we look at an astrology chart, it essentially is giving us the planets are like packages of mental tendencies essentially that we've accumulated from past lifetimes. So if somebody has, say, an abrasive personality, it should show with the planetary placements within the astrology chart. So I was able to come up with 9 different factors. And let me put up the slideshow for you all first. We're going to talk about the 9 factors really quickly, but then we're actually going to dive into the chart. I'm going to show you that she ticks 8 out of the 9, and actually I would say 8.5 out of the 9 factors, which can be is quite interesting. So again, like I said in the beginning, reports allege that Meghan can be difficult to deal with or work under. There have been reports that she is abrasive, and one person even described her as a demon. Does the astrology chart indicate a difficult personality? Okay, so if you look at it, there's a few factors we're looking at. We're going to look at Mars because Mars is, if it's afflicted, it could show us being irritable. It could show us being angry. We're looking at Saturn's influence on Mars because Saturn and Mars together can create, again, just this person that could be irritable. They don't really know how to deal with anger, those kind of situations. Mars in conjunction with Rahu or Ketu. Remember, Rahu tends to exaggerate, whereas K2 also can kind of bring up a lot of past life, karma. Afflicted sun. Remember, the sun represents the soul in a general way, but it also, it can represent our body in a general way. Malefic's in the 7th house. This is how we deal with other people. Afflicted moon, because the moon is our sense of our feeling nature, our sensitive nature. Mercury, which represents our intellect. Rahu in these 4 houses, and Malefic and Lagna. So we're going to go through all of these, and we are going to see that she actually, unfortunately, does seem to tick most of these boxes. Now, I'm not actually saying, I do want to point this out before I get people in the comments that say, I'm being unfair to Meghan. I do want to point out that astrology is actually neutral. And how we judge other people, whether we call them abrasive or we call them nice, it's actually a very subjective thing. So I do want to make that very clear. So it's a very subjective type of thing. So when we're looking at astrology, we're just looking at, okay, this is afflicted, this is afflicted. the society is the one that puts the value judgment on it of what abrasive means. What does it mean for someone to be rude? That's a societal judgment. The astrology chart is actually neutral. So let's go ahead. The first thing we're going to be talking about in the astrology chart is we're going to be looking at a Mars and seeing if Mars is afflicted. And then we're going to be also looking at Saturn here. Okay. So the one thing I want to point out, and remember, Mars represents our sense of aggression, conflict, anger, those kinds of things. So in this chart, Mars, it's in the 12th house, which the 12th house can show that she might actually end up Mars in the 12th house can represent someone, for example, they could have insomnia, like a lack of sleep, because 12th house represents sleep. They could be somebody that actually pursues spiritual pursuits, but also Mars could be lead to a loss of energy or loss of vitality for the native that has this placement. But I'm not really necessarily worried about it being in 12th house. What I'm noticing, it's actually afflicted by Saturn. Okay. So right away, we know that Saturn is afflicting Mars. So what that creates when Saturn is afflicting Mars is it's like a push-pull kind of mechanism that takes place. Mars wants to move forward. Mars can represent aggression, and it can represent aggression in a healthy way, like when somebody wrongs us and we have to establish boundaries with people. Well, Saturn adds this kind of like suppression to that, so we can tend to overemphasize when we get angry or when we feel abrasive. So Saturn can kind of cause problems for Mars, essentially. So that's one of the factors that can show an abrasive personality. Also, remember the second factor is Saturn involved? Well, yeah, we just talked about it. Saturn is the one that's afflicting Mars. So that's also showing that's factor number 2. Let's look at factor number 3 here. So we're already seeing, okay, there's some now with just those 2 planets alone, I wouldn't be like thinking, oh, this is somebody who's totally, flying off the handle just based on Mars being afflicted, but we're looking at a lot of other things here. So for example, number 3 is Mars in conjunction with Rahu or Ketu. This is the one that I'm calling 0.5, and let me show you in the chart here. So so if we look at where Mars is in the 12th house, Rahu or Ketu, it's not with Mars in the 12th house. However, if we look at the D9 chart, which is over here, this is the D9, which is called the Navamsa chart. Well, Mars is with Ketu in the Navamsa chart, and the Navamsa chart can deal a lot with our personality. So it has to deal with our astral nature. So I'm calling that a 0.5. This could definitely indicate, with K2 being with Mars, there's a lot of past life kind of tendencies leading to some difficulty with Mars. So basically, Mars is being afflicted in the D1 chart by Saturn, and then in the Navamsa chart, Mars is being afflicted by K2. So Mars is being afflicted in both charts, which could show it can be a problematic planet. The other thing I want to bring up it doesn't have anything to do with the 9 factors that I'm talking about, is remember, Meghan has Kuja dosha, which if we count the houses, I think I accidentally labeled these 1, 2, 3, 4. How did I get to 7? Okay. 6, 7, 8. So Mars, it aspects 4 houses from itself, and then it aspects 8 houses from itself. And you notice it's aspecting the 7th house, which is Kuja dosha, which could make too much Mars energy within like marriage relationships, or even just like long-term romantic relationships. So we also know that Kuja dosha by itself, just that alone, can cause conflict within at least personal relationships. So the Kuja dosha, since the 7th house can represent people in a general way, definitely it could represent, I think, especially when we look at these other placements, the 7th house represents other people just in a general way. So again, Kuja dosha is there. Afflicted sun, that's number 4. And then we have malefics in the 7th house. So let's look at both of those. So malefic sun, And let's bring that up. So Sun, you would think, oh, it's okay in the first house, but it's with Rahu. So that means Sun is afflicted there. The other thing we're going to talk about, not just the Sun, but we also have to look at the seventh house. Remember, there's Kuja dosha that's aspecting the seventh house, but it also said if there's malefic planets in the seventh house, well, Ketu's in the seventh house. This is another factor. So Ketu's in the seventh house. And then we got Kuja dosha. We have Sun being afflicted by Rahu. Now, Sun can be like when it's with Rahu, and I want to talk about this for a moment. Sun with Rahu, it can cause somebody to be very self-centered, very self-focused. Sometimes people can have and like very self-focused, very egocentric qualities about themselves when Rahu's with Sun. So it's kind of like a me type of placement. And also they can have a lot of power issues because remember, Rahu, what it does is it exaggerates what the Sun is about. Now, the other thing is when Ketu's in the seventh house, what this can cause is somebody not to have empathy for other people. Because with Rahu in the first, the focus is more on the self in self elevation. So Ketu in the seventh would show that there could be a lack of empathy, a lack of being able to, and remember, this is an astrology reading, a lack of being able to fully put yourself in someone else's shoes and look from their point of view. So it could be somebody who's very self centered with Rahu in the first, and then K2 in the seventh. There's a lot of other factors. Remember, so we already have that Mars is afflicted. We have the Kuja dosha. We have Saturn afflicting Mars. We have Rahu in the first house, K2 in the seventh. So we have many different factors that are playing here, which already we're starting to develop this case that some of these former staff members, there may be something to this. The other thing is the afflicted moon and then Mercury with malefics. Okay, so if we have an afflicted moon, remember, moon is our sense of contentment. So if we're not content, we're going to tend to be irritable, and we could possibly take it out on others, right? Well, if we look at where moon is in the third house with Saturn. So this conjunction right here, that's putting a lot of pressure on the moon. Mainly with Saturn with moon, it's not necessarily as aggressive as it would be with Mars with moon. Saturn with moon is more somebody that could suffer from worrying a lot, anxiousness. Um, and because of that, when somebody's like very nervous or worrying a lot, they can tend to like become very short or irritable with people because they're kind of like in their own head thinking a lot. So that's what that can cause. Sometimes Saturn alone in the third house can also create somebody with like negative thinking. So somebody who's more, they see the glass half empty versus half full, they see it half empty. So it could be a pessimism with Saturn just in the third house, because the third house represents the sense of pessimism in life. The other thing, remember, we're going to look at the other factor is the condition of Mercury. Why do we look at Mercury? Mercury represents the intellect and our communication. So the intellect or communication, well, remember, it is Mercury being afflicted. Yep, it's with Rahu. It's almost like every planet in her chart is literally being afflicted, and it's like, wow. Like I like when I started looking at this and started doing the research, I just kept on being like, wow, it's almost like every planet has some sort of affliction. So Mercury being afflicted with this with Rahu, again, Rahu can make somebody very grandiose. It can make somebody, Rahu to me can represent like passive aggressiveness almost, or somebody who's always trying to get the win in, somebody who's trying to they always have an angle, like if they're talking to you, maybe they're always trying to do some sort of one-upsmanship kind of contest with you. That's a typical Rahu thing. So it's very solipsistic Rahu. With Mercury, by the way, also it can cause somebody to exaggerate. So somebody could exaggerate how angry they are. They could exaggerate the problems that are going on. So let's keep that in mind. Let's look at the next factor. I forgot if I didn't already mention it. We looked at Mercury. Now we got to look at the last two factors are going to be either Rahu in the 1, 7, 10, or 11, because these houses are considered important for the personality structure. And then is there a malefic planet in the ascendant, the Lagna? And we're going to see right now. So is Rahu in 1, 7, 10, or 11? Well, look at that. Yes, Rahu's in the first house. Remember, 1, 7, 10, or 11, Rahu's in the first. The other thing that we need to look at was the next factor was, and I'm already forgetting about it. Is there a malefic in the Lagna? Okay. And let me go back to the chart. Well, there's actually two malefics in the Lagna. Now the sun is considered like a mild, like if we're just looking at like, is the sun considered like a malefic in a natural way? It is. Is that it's actually considered a mild malefic. So Sun and Rahu in the first house, that's a malefic in Lagna. Remember, Rahu in the first house can create somebody who's just very self-focused. Again, so there's been a lot of people where, even when this whole like Megxit and Meghan and Harry leaving the royal duties, there was part of me when I was first hearing about these things where I was thinking like, well, you know what, maybe people just like don't like her, maybe they're jealous because she got married to Prince Harry, maybe there's just a lot of, if we want to call it drinking the haterade out there, maybe there's just a lot of people that just don't like it. But the more and more I've studied the astrology chart, I'm like, okay, because there's people that have claimed that she's very self-focused, very self-centered. Well, the astrology chart does have a lot of ego-centered placement of planets within it, self-focused. Now, as an astrologer, remember the astrology chart is actually very neutral in and of itself. We're the ones that are making the value judgment. So I mean, 1 out of 12 people are going to have Rahu in the first house. Does that make them all like these egotistical, extremely self-centered, self-focused people? Absolutely not. So there's a lot of factors that we got to look at. But the thing about it, with a lot of these afflicted planets within Megan's chart, it can just show that there's not a lot of, for example, when we think about planetary intelligence, there's not a lot of experience working with some of these energies. So with your afflicted Mars, you don't know how to handle conflict in a proper way, how to be assertive in a proper way. So we could see that in this chart. So I would say that based on the astrology chart, it does feel like some of these people may have, some definite. It does seem to support some of the statements that have been made. So what do you think about that? Let me know down below in the comments. I very much appreciate reading all your comments. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next video. If you have another royal family member or a situation you'd like me to look at astrologically, please put that in the comments as well. Thank you very much, and I will see you all in the next one.